Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. This is Two-Way. Two-Way Tonight is the name of this particular program, and we're glad that you're willing and able to spend an hour or so with us tonight, updating on the presidential campaign and continuing our focus on election casting and counting of ballots to try to help get to Election Day and hopefully not too far beyond. We're in the 7 battleground states. All citizens have confidence in the outcome. So we're not dealing with a situation where the losing side feels the election was not fair. With us will be some officials from Wisconsin to talk about how that state is dealing with casting and counting. It's not been the most newsy day on the trail. Let's tell you what has happened, what we do know. Vice President Harris has been in Wisconsin for the day. He's done a series of events, pretty high energy. And the dominant news story of the day, the death of the Hamas leader Sinwar, has been a great focus of the administration, both officially and the vice president on the campaign trail, President Biden, other administration officials, raising this as something that they hope leads to more peace and the prospects of a resolution in Gaza and beyond. We've seen before them trying to take developments and push things in that direction, and obviously we hope it's true, but we've also seen time and again that there have been problems they're caused rather than leading to greater peace and negotiation, that events like this can sometimes send things spiraling in a bad way. And of course, everybody's concerned about the hostages. So we're going to look at the vice president today. We'll talk a little bit about Donald Trump, look at one poll result that came in today, talk a little bit about the early vote. And then again, we're going to switch to talking about Wisconsin and counting and casting. If you want to be involved in the conversation and you're here on the Two-Way platform, please raise your electronic hand. We'll get to you all on all of these topics, whatever else is on your mind. And if you're watching on YouTube, we're glad that you're here and we welcome your participation in the chat. As always, our mantra, peace, love, and understanding. Don't use this platform the way you might use a lot of the platforms for political discourse in the world. Try to make this the one platform or a platform where we're all trying to understand each other. If someone says something you don't agree with, use it as an opportunity to learn rather than letting out your inner hatred or disgust or disdain. So, as I said, Vice President in Wisconsin, Donald Trump hasn't been in public today in a formal way. He did do a photo op at a barber shop, which we may show you in a little bit, here in New York City. But the vice president spoke out in the wake of the news of the day to be involved in acknowledging the death of the Hamas leader. Let's take a look at that.
Today, Israel confirmed that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is dead, and justice has been served. And the United States, Israel, and the entire world are better off as a result. Sinwar was responsible for the killing of thousands of innocent people, including the victims of October 7 and hostages killed in Gaza. He had American blood on his hands. Today, I can only hope that the families of the victims of Hamas feel a sense and measure of relief. Sinwar was the mastermind of October 7, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. A terrorist attack that killed 1,200 innocent people and included horrific sexual violence and more than 250 hostages taken into Gaza, including 7 Americans, living and deceased, who remain in captivity. A terrorist attack that triggered a devastating war in Gaza, a war that has led to unconscionable suffering of many innocent Palestinians and greater instability throughout the Middle East. In the past year, American Special Operations and intelligence personnel have worked closely with their Israeli counterparts to locate and track Sinwar and other Hamas leaders. And I commend their work. And I will say, to any terrorist who kills Americans, threatens the American people, or threatens our troops or our interests, know this: we will always bring you to justice.
All right, a few more things about the vice president's day. She has been met throughout the day in Wisconsin, maybe not surprising given the location, by anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian protesters, some insider events, some outside. She also decided, I don't know when, but it was announced that she made a video for the Al Smith dinner here in Gotham City that she's skipping, but there'll be a video played at the event, so we'll look forward to seeing that tonight. And then finally, probably most significantly, her message today continues along with the notion of an emphasis on something Donald Trump opened the door to last night with his Univision town hall, talking about January 6th, talking about the notion of not going back to Donald Trump and Donald Trump being unfit for office. And we debated quite at length. You missed it on the morning meeting, this question of whether that's an effective closing message. It's the message Joe Biden ran on in 20 effectively, was not working for Joe Biden in 24, but perhaps that had nothing to do with the message, but the messenger. So her remarks today, heavy on that same theme, and we'll keep talking about that. The New York Times has a story that ran a little while ago about how some Republicans, not surprisingly, are concerned that Donald Trump is getting off message, not just in talking about January 6th in a celebratory way, but other topics that he brings up as part of his famous weave that they believe are ill-serving him. And it's one of the first indications, and I've heard it too beyond the New York Times story, it's one of the first indications when Republicans who believe they're going to win express concern. There are three main topics they bring up. One is the question of Donald Trump being undisciplined, off message, and particularly doing things to remind people to dovetail with the Harris, what seems to be the Harris closing message, that of things like election denialism that they don't find helpful. Two is the ground game. And there's lots out there today, including a new Wall Street Journal story about how Republicans worry that the unusual way the Republican operation is built with both folks from the campaign as well as outside people with whom they're coordinating, that they worry about that mismatch, that the Democrats have a better ground game. And finally, the money. We've talked about this before. Just the sheer advantage that the Harris folks have in dollars, not just on the ground game, but on television and other things. They do worry that in a close race could be dispositive. Finally, continues to be the debate that we engage in here regularly about the early voting starting in North Carolina. And you can see all over social media, both sides putting out photos and data suggesting that all these bundles of things we talk about, early vote, voter registration, absentee, in person, all of these things, both sides claiming that the signs are good for them. I would say on balance, I still couldn't tell you how long it's going to be before we know which side has actually got a better, more optimistic argument to make. It's not obviously clear, I would say, that just because there's been high turnout now in the opening of early vote in Georgia, that high necessarily helps the Democrats, or that the fact that it's high in some rural areas necessarily means the Republicans are going to be well positioned. It does seem clear that the delta between the Democrats and Republicans in 2004 will be smaller in the battleground states where we can measure it than in 2020, where Republicans were badly outgunned on all these forms of early vote. But we just don't know yet where that will actually end up. Okay. When we go to your questions, you can ask about any of that stuff or anything else you want. But we're going to move now to talking about what we've talked about in a previous episode, and we'll continue to stay on casting and counting of ballots. And we're going to talk about it in the context of Wisconsin. Of course, everybody knows one of the 7 battleground states where Vice President Harris is today. And I'd love for my colleagues to bring in our guests who are here to talk about this. It's super important that everybody understand that election administrators are sometimes partisan and register through, run for the offices as partisan figures, and sometimes they don't. And that doesn't mean that they administer the offices in a partisan way. So we'll talk about that. Lori, I'm going to go to you first because you're first in. Do you live in Janesville or you work in Janesville or both?
Both.
Both.
I've been a resident for about 26 years, and I've worked here as a clerk treasurer for 3.
Janesville has a great Chinese restaurant that's very, very proud of its. I think the sign out front, I can't remember the name of it, said it was the best Chinese food in all of Wisconsin.
Cozy Inn.
Cozy Inn, right? It's incredible dining room too. I love the Cozy Inn, and every time I go to Janesville, I hope to be able to dine there. So as we welcome your colleagues in, Lori, we'll start with you. Just tell folks how long you've been and what your election administration job is now. How big is your county? Just talk about the parameters of what you do.
Sure. So I've been an elected county clerk. I was elected twice for about 8 years. So I've held the county clerk position. I've been a clerk treasurer in the city south of us here in Beloit, and was lucky enough to be able to get a position here in my home community. Janesville is about 66,000 people, of which about 51,000 are eligible to vote. And Rock County, of the 72 counties, is about 168,000.
Okay. And are you elected as a partisan? Do you run as a
Nope,
Republican?
I am a nonpartisan appointed election administrator.
Okay. And talk about what your responsibilities are as an election administrator.
So the county clerk programs the election, and then it is my job to set up 10 polling locations and our central count where we process absentee ballots, find about 400 volunteer election inspectors, get them trained up to be able to run the election on election day, get the polls opened, be available all day long for questions and managing any issues that happen during the day, and then take in the results at night, secure them, and verify that the results posted on the county's webpage are exactly what we received here through the tape and reports that come into our office on election night. And then we reconcile and make sure that every voter that cast a ballot gets that credit in our state system.
How does your information get transmitted from local to the state?
So there are three. Our equipment actually, when every voter places their ballot into the tabulator, it takes a picture of the front and the back of the ballot, and then we have the paper ballot that are secured. On election night, there is an internal modem that we activate after 8 o'clock that sends it to the county clerk, and at that same time, it runs a tabulator tape. So we have the tape, the county has the modemed results, and that's what we're matching up before we go to sleep.
Okay, so I want to ask you about before you go to sleep. Funny you bring that up. If you're not done and it's 5 in the morning and everybody's tired and the nation is waiting for Wisconsin's results, do you say let's go to sleep and we'll come back at 10 and figure it out, or do you count until you're done?
We have pulled a couple all-nighters. This is my 5th presidential election in my career, and my 62nd election in general. And we've had a few all-nighters. When we have recounts, we will possibly suspend a recount and go home and get a few hours of shut-eye. But when we are on election day, it would take a judge to be able to let us take a break and go home. So we generally stick with it until we have everything in.
Okay, Lori, thank you. Diane, you next. Thank you, Lori. Stay with us, of course. Diane, tell folks again where you are in Wisconsin and what your position is, how long you've had it, and what the dimensions of your responsibilities are.
So, Diane Conan is my name. I'm the clerk here in the city of Oconomowoc. We are 20,000 population with about 14,000 registered voters. I have worked here in the city for 20 years, but prior to that, I worked in another community in Waukesha County. That's where I'm located, Village of Butler, for 6 years. So I'm now into my 27th year being a clerk. I have administered 7 presidential elections, and I have seen a lot of things over all the years. Lots of great things, good things. Some things you wish didn't happen. Like Lori, I administer the elections. I am a local official. I do not run on a ballot for my position. I am appointed. It's nonpartisan. What else can I tell you?
Diane, what do you do on election day? How do you spend your election day?
So my day, obviously I get up very early in the morning, and I have to go. I have 4 polls, and I go to each poll before they open up, and I make sure the poll is ready to go. So at 7 a.m. when the chief announces polls are now open, we are set to go and we're rolling. Throughout the day, I make several trips to each of my polls. Like Lori, I administer any or troubleshoot any issues If they call me and I need to get to the poll, I get to the poll. This is all day long. It doesn't stop. When the polls close, I am in my office, and we are there for our chief inspectors who are in charge of the polls. If they have any closing issues, to call upon us. If not, like Lori, I am waiting for all the results, the polls to be closed, all voters to be processed, all absentee ballots to be processed, and we can get those results tapes. We make sure every poll is balanced before we go home. And if that means staying all night, we stay all night. And the next morning, all those materials from each of our polls, the machine tapes, the totals, which have already been sent to the county and are uploaded onto the Waukesha County's website, which we are too verifying that everything is matching. All of those materials must be taken to our county clerk the next morning, as soon as we can get them there. And so election day is really not just that day. There's many other pieces to it.
Yep.
Throughout
Diane,
the whole cycle.
Diane, in your county and throughout the state, if you know, how many different kinds of voting equipment are used?
In Waukesha County, we are all using the exact same equipment. We use DS200 machines as the main voting machine, and then we have the Express Vote, which is our ADA accessibility machine, and that is throughout all 37 municipalities in our county.
And do you know statewide, are everyone using that equipment, or
No.
are there different?
There are different, some do use it, yes, but there are different pieces of equipment throughout the state.
Yeah. And does Wisconsin have provisional ballots, and how does that work in your county?
Provisional ballots are given for two reasons. Provisional ballot is if on registration, or excuse me, when you go to the poll and register and you cannot provide your driver's license or state ID number, you have one, but you can't provide it, you'll be able to still register with correct proof of residence. And if you have a photo ID there, which it can be something other than a Wisconsin ID card or driver's license, you can vote. But because you can't provide us with that number of your license or ID card, it's provisional. The other is if you are registered and you get to the poll book people where you have to check in the book, sign the book, etc., get a voter number. If you don't have your photo ID with you, but you're in the book, you're registered, you can't vote your ballot, meaning put it in the machine so it's cast. You can get a ballot, but it's provisional, and it's set aside until you can provide that photo ID, as well as your ID number or license number.
All right, Diane, thank you. I'm hoping everyone who's on here and watching us feel as I do. These are two impressive professionals representing the people in this country we're all putting our faith in to do a great job on election day so everyone can have confidence in the system. I'm so heartened to hear the two of you. And again, how on top of this you are, how professional, how experienced. Thank you. Two other folks from Wisconsin. Okay, we're going to meet now. Marge is part of an organization that Two-Way is delighted to work with here to try to do these episodes to give everybody confidence in the system. Keep Our Republic. It focuses on the Great Lakes states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and they're one of several groups around the country that you probably haven't heard of that are doing this kind of work. They're trying to make sure that election officials and professionals can do their jobs with bipartisan confidence, that they're competent, they're honest, they're experienced, they're determined to give the country what we need, which is faith in the final outcome. And we couldn't be happier to have the four of you here to give people a sense of the humanity involved here. These are not faceless bureaucrats. These are members of the community who have important jobs to do. So, Marge, you're part of Keep Our Republic, Wisconsin.
Correct. Yes.
And you used to be an election administrator. Just give us briefly what your career as election administrator, and then tell us sort of overview. What concerns do you have about election administration in 2024 in Wisconsin, if any?
Well, I was county clerk in a small county in Wisconsin, Green Lake County, for 24 years. So unlike the municipal clerks, the county clerk has a different role in elections, but we work together. While I was county clerk, I often did trainings. I was certified to be able to do trainings for poll workers, chief inspectors, other trainings that happened throughout the years, because it was 24 years. So I think I wanted to mention that I think history is important, and I think we don't understand what's currently happening unless we understand a little bit about history. So when I took office in 1993, there was no statewide voter registration. There mostly was mostly paper ballots in small communities. So when a person would go into a small community, there were two ladies who had the best handwriting who wrote their names and addresses in a polling book. And that is how it was. And there was no sharing of who was in your municipality, to vote. There was no sharing. Like now we have a statewide voter registration. So immediately you can tell if somebody is voting in someplace different. That is brought up through the not on the day of election, but if there's a vote cast in two different places, that's going to show. They didn't have that then. And also there wasn't a lot of machines at the time. That didn't happen till after 2000. So we were mostly doing hand counts. And I always get surprised when people say we should go back to that, because that is so labor intensive and it is so easy to have a mistake.
Yep.
So I just want to mention that that was all going on when I first started, and to
Yep.
have the machines now is marvelous. So as county clerk, as the ladies were speaking of what they do during the day, the county clerk is a support to them throughout the day if they need something. But really the county clerk doesn't go into the office until maybe 7 o'clock that night, because we are then being called in. The municipal clerks will call into the county clerks the totals of what's happened throughout the day. And as they mentioned, they will return all the information to the county clerk either that night or the next day. So that is what the county clerk does in regard to that. And then we, throughout the night, will call the Associated Press to give the numbers of what we've been told by the municipal clerks. Then on Friday, 3 days later, most clerks will be doing their county canvas. So we look at all the municipalities from our county and we verify their totals with the tapes that they've given us. And we verify to make sure that all the numbers that were called into us are correct. So
Marge, in that process, how often are there discrepancies?
Seldom, but if there are discrepancies, we will, as a county clerk and as my canvas committee, we will call in a municipal clerk and say, can you explain this as to why this is one way or another? And then they will come in and we'll determine what's going on. It doesn't happen very often, but we do have the municipal clerks come in and explain things to us.
Right. All right. So Marge, for 2024, what would be your top 2 or 3 concerns about administering the election in Wisconsin?
I am not part of administering anything anymore, but I currently do sit on the Wisconsin Elections Commission. So through the commission, we will be getting emails throughout the day of what's happening throughout the state. But I don't know that I have concerns. I have so much faith in our municipal clerks. They know what they're doing. They have poll workers that have been trained. I don't worry about that as much as maybe something happening outside of the polling place or something like that. But
Right.
I have no concerns about this is going to be a fair and accurate and safe election.
Outstanding. Let me ask you one more question, then we'll go to our 4th and final Wisconsin guest. What would be the upside and the downside of having a state, all the counties and municipalities in a state use the same voting method to avoid any questions about equal protection, to avoid any ambiguity about the results between different counties? Why shouldn't states, as a state, say, we're all going to use the same voting equipment?
Well, I think our government gives elections to the states to be able to conduct their elections their own way.
Yeah. I'm not saying the whole country uses the same equipment, but I'd like to see everybody in Wisconsin vote on the same equipment.
In Wisconsin, municipal clerks are the ones who actually run the elections.
Yeah.
And they have the opportunity to pick whatever type of device or machine they want. I don't see that as being any type of a problem. I think all of the machines that we have are certified through the uh, United States government, the federal
Yep.
government, and then they're
Yep.
certified through Wisconsin. So I don't see that there's any problem or that there would be any big difference if all the same machines were used. They
Yeah.
all do the same thing.
I'll tell you why I feel that way. And I respect your position absolutely. Part of the challenge for the country, and we saw this in 2000 in Florida when America got an education,
Yes.
where you had all the Florida counties voted different ways, right? And people were amazed at the level of autonomy given to individual counties. And some counties were really good. And then in Palm Beach, we had a butterfly ballot, right? And so the people in Palm Beach were disenfranchised to some extent because their election administrators didn't do a great job. I think our challenge is to demystify the process and to give people faith that everything's being done on the up and up. And what happens when you have different systems is you have the conspiracy, you give the conspiracy theorists the ability to say, well, in this Democratic county or in this Republican county, they voted in a different way. And there's questions about that way. If it were uniform, to me, it would remove one of the ways the conspiracy theorists are able to grab onto a narrative and drive it. And I'm for decentralization, but I don't see why people in Green Bay and Milwaukee can't vote on the same machines. I don't see why that would be a negative, except for taking power away from the counties to pick the vendor they wanted to pick.
Well, I don't see a lot of the machines do all this. They all do the same thing. They all accept a ballot. They all count a ballot. They all store the ballot. There are nothing is on the internet. There are no internet connections.
Yep.
Everything is in the sense that the fact that they count ballots, I don't know what the discrepancy could be between the different machines.
The irrationality and the incentives of the conspiracy theorists. You're right. As long as they're approved machines, they should be fine. All right.
So
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Being on the election commission where we have to look at machines before they're approved, I see the machines and I've worked with the machines. And after I retired, I worked for one of the companies and I did trainings on some of the machines. I have no doubt that the machines act the same, perform the same way, accomplish the same thing.
Right.
Even though they may be different vendors.
Right. I agree with you on the merits. I just worry about the ability of people to seize on individual county results and raise questions. All right. In a normal kind of traditional operation, if you had a former member of Congress as one of the people, maybe they get to go first. But I know that the least self-effacing member of Congress from Wisconsin in my career was Paul Ryan, and he's about the most self-effacing person I ever met. So Congressman Ribble, thank you for joining us. I saved you for last. You're a big part of Keep Our Republic in Wisconsin. I'd love for you to tell folks, whether they were with us last time or not, why are you involved as a former Republican congressman? Why are you involved in Keep Our Republic? And what is the status of your mission a few weeks from Election Day in Wisconsin?
Mark, it's good to be with you, and thanks for asking really a very important question is why are any of us doing this? And in part, it's because we believe that the conspiracies that were centered around the 2020 election have damaged people's confidence in the election system itself, even though there's really no evidence of any type of massive fraud. And so part of Keep Our Republic's mission is to the degree we can, to reinstill some trust in how these elections are conducted, and to let them know, listen, it's fair not to trust politicians. We get that. But what we would like you to do is trust the over 1,800 municipal and county clerks in Wisconsin that are very disparate. They're spread all over the place, which actually that number of people makes it safer for you simply because it's hard to scam a system that has so many individual moving pieces. And it's part why our founders set up a system to let the states run our national elections. And so we're trying to rebuild and reinstill trust. We tell people, fine, what we'd like you to do, though, is trust that person that is in your local voting precinct, that is checking your ID, that's marking your address, that's opening an envelope for a mail-in ballot and comparing the signature and setting it aside and protecting who submitted that ballot and protecting how they voted. And really, those people, often senior citizens, often someone who might be sitting 2 or 3 rows in front of you at church, at the synagogue, or at some club meeting you've got, and that take this work very seriously. And I think that for me, my message has been all of us as members of Congress or state assemblymen or state senators were on the exact same ballot as the presidential candidates were. And why is it that only one thing was stolen and not everybody else's? And so I just really believe that we need to do this hard work today so that after November 5th, people feel comfortable, at least comfortable to the degree that they can, that the election was conducted fairly.
Congressman, thank you. Thank all four of you for joining. Again, if you'd like to get involved in this part of the conversation, to talk about election administration in Wisconsin, one of the 7 battlegrounds, and more broadly, please keep your hand up if you want to talk about the race. Otherwise, we'll get to that as well. Again, very grateful to all four of you for joining. Congressman, one more for you, and then I want to go back to Lori and Diane and ask them about some administrative questions. What do you think the status is? If you look at current confidence in the system, again, just a couple weeks out, legal action, pending decisions for administrators, state or large counties, what's your current sense of how the trajectory is as we head towards Election Day?
I think the trajectory is very, very partisan. And so, and when I say that, sadly, because I'm a Republican, that there are still way too many Republicans in the state of Wisconsin that will want to instill as much lack of confidence in case their favored candidate doesn't win. And that's really tragic. And so I believe you're going to see some and continue to see lawsuits throughout the process as various people try to, I don't know what all their motivation is, but they try to make it so that you don't have faith in what the result is. And I don't know what America or the American people gain by that. It just seems a little bit odd to me. And so, but
So
the trajectory is bad.
What are Keep Our Republic's activities between now and Election Day to try to stem the tide on that as much as you can?
We've spent a lot of time with county clerks and propping them up and making sure that they feel safe and supported. But then we've been doing town halls all throughout the state of Wisconsin and talking with citizens, bringing 200, 300, 400 people into a group and talking about how elections are conducted, why they should have confidence in them, and why they should trust these 3 women that are on the panel with me today because of the great work that they do. All they want is a result that reflects the will of the people who cast those ballots. That's it. That's all they really want. And that's what we've been going on. And that's what we're going to continue to do right up to Election Day.
Okay. Lori, do you have enough volunteers and enough workers to do what needs to be done, or do you need more help? Oh, sorry, got to unmute you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. It's almost a full-time job just getting the volunteers together when you have 10 polling places and the number of absentee ballots that, we've got about 51,000 eligible voters and we've already issued 8,000 absentee ballots. We go into our in-person absentee voting on Tuesday. We expect that number to double. So I think we are in a good place for volunteers, but boy, if I had a bucket of about 40 more, I'd feel a lot better. But people have been stepping into the gap. For a while, I think people were a little bit afraid. Is it safe? Is it, and we have really had, I never thought in all the years I've been doing this, I never thought I'd have to spend so much time on safety and security, but we really do feel good about the workers that we have and, the numbers that we're at right now. And we've got just under 3 weeks to clean it up.
Yeah. Lori, one more for you. In Wisconsin, when are you able to start counting the early vote?
We can start at 7 o'clock on Election Day. So we don't get to start counting anything until 7 o'clock on Election Day.
And are you able to count them during the day, or does it wait till later because you're administering the in-person?
we run a central count. Sorry, my lights went off. I guess they think everybody went home. We run a central count in the city of Janesville, which means I set up a polling place here at City Hall, and I have about 30 people coming in right now. I may have to expand that number as the numbers of ballots go up, but we start at 7 o'clock in Ward 1 with our absentees, and we count all the way through the day. And then our live in-person polling places do not have to worry about interjecting absentees between voters. They can just focus on the voters that are there in person and make sure that they can reconcile the work that day.
Diane, when you think about Election Day, what do you anticipate? What are you looking for that could potentially go wrong and try to head it off?
Well, as much as I don't want to think about what could potentially go wrong, we usually always get on Election Day in the morning calls from some of our poll workers. Maybe they're ill, a loved one is ill, an emergency has come up. So now we have to find a replacement. You only have so much time because the polls open at 7, and if you get the call at 6, you're hustling to try and get that done. You don't want to start your day off that way, feeling so rushed and making sure you have the right coverage, but it usually happens. The other thing we anticipate and we try and problem solve ahead of time is that we don't balance. There's a number of reasons why a poll might not balance. When I say not balancing, I'm talking the number is off by 1, maybe 2. And so we do a lot of different procedures throughout the day to check that number. Are we balancing? We're, making sure we write everything down on an incident log, because that could be the key as to why you're not balancing. You're off that 1 number. My poll workers, I train them personally. If they think something is wrong, they talk to their teammate and they stop the process right away to get a handle on it, to regroup, to make sure things are right and they're moving smoothly. The other things I am worried about now that I didn't really worry about years ago is the safety. I've always worried about safety because you have so many people coming into a poll, but it's a different type of worry now. And my poll workers also have that worry. They come to me and express that. And for me, that is disheartening. We work so hard, all of us. We try and put so many procedures in place, checks and balances throughout the day. It is a lot of work from start to finish. What you do on the front end affects Election Day, and Election Day affects what happens on the back end. So even though we might not all be working together at the same moment within eye shot of each other, we are working all together as a team. And so we just try so hard to be as prepared as we can, because over the years, when little things have happened, not major problems, you learn to adjust and do things differently. And I say, I keep telling everybody, we are such a well-oiled machine. My staff has been with me for the same 20 years that I have been here. And we just work so well together. So.
Thank you. Marge, Wisconsin, during Governor Walker's time in office, I'm not putting the blame all on him, but just when he was in office, it became a more partisan state. Madison became extremely partisan. You had recall, you had lots of hard-fought elections. And since then, that's unfortunately been the cultural pattern. Does that make it harder for election administrators that the state the political culture has become so divided on partisan lines?
I don't know as far as those who are conducting the elections, whether that makes that much of a difference for them. I can see it being a much stronger in Madison at the Capitol, but I don't see it quite as much as far as the municipal clerks being able to conduct the election. There may be some areas. I think after the 2020 election, there was some issues with regard to questioning political motivations in some of the municipalities, but I don't see that as, I would like not to think that that's going to be a problem going into this election.
Okay. One last question for the congressman, and then I want to get everybody in. So again, if you'd like to ask a question or make a point, please raise your hand. Congressman, the people in the news business and some citizens have a fetish for knowing who won on election night. I'm more for accurate than I am for fast. But I'm for fast too, because a lot of people demand it, not just people in the press. And as you know, the longer ballots sit out there, the longer the state is uncertified or unprojected by the AP and others, the more the conspiracy theorists thrive. So how do you see that balance between trying to get a projection on election night, or or that's not a priority as compared to making sure the count's correct?
I think it's always, you always default to a correct count. However, Wisconsin doesn't allow mail-in ballots to be started to count until the morning of the election day. And not every state is that way. Matter of fact, there's a whole potpourri of how states handle this, and some states get it done faster, some states get it done later. For example, the state of Arizona, they start counting mail-in ballots as they come in.
Yeah.
Wyoming, it's like a week before. It just depends. There's 50 different states and they're doing it different ways. But if we wanted to speed that process up, Wisconsin could start counting in mail ballots earlier, and that would help. But I also think when you look at rural states like Wisconsin, you've got a lot of rural counties that you've got antiquated equipment, and you've got a slower process, and sometimes those counties report late. But then you've got the big inner cities like Milwaukee and Madison that just have a lot of mail-in ballots that have to be tabulated and checked and make sure they're that the person who is signing that is legit. And so there's a process there, and I just encourage American people to be patient with the process, let the process work its way out. It would be nice if we could get something done on election night, but I think we're a ways away from that. And the more people that use mail-in ballots and have the convenience of it, the longer it sometimes can take, especially in Wisconsin, if the legislature doesn't act to allow counting to begin even earlier.
How do you vote, Congressman?
I have voted by mail and I vote in person, but now that I'm retired, I have a tendency to vote in person and I vote early.
Yeah. Okay. So grateful to all four of you. We're going to bring folks in to ask you questions, make comments. But I personally, and for Two-Way, couldn't appreciate more you all spending this time with us to explain the situation there in your important state. Doug, welcome in. Tell folks where you are and what's on your mind on this important topic.
Thank you very much, Mark. I actually now right now I'm Montreal, Canada, but I'm a Florida voter. And my question, I'm not sure if any of your experts can answer this, but why don't states have any cross-checking? For years, I voted in Connecticut. Then for 1 year, I voted in New York. Now I vote in Florida, but I'm still registered to vote in all three states. And obviously it's illegal, so I wouldn't do it, but I could vote in all three states. Why isn't there a national database that prevents that?
Who wants to take that on? That's a great question.
Well, let's talk about good old Eric. Marge, were you going to talk about Eric?
That's what I was going to talk about, is good old Eric.
Okay, Doug, we have a program that it's an interstate cooperative with the Midwest states here in the Midwest that actually do have a cross check. So I believe we've got Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Michigan.
Florida is in there, Colorado's in there. It's wider than that.
Yeah, so there is you have to opt in, is my understanding, as a state. And so we do use that. There are some concerns about that data going back and forth between states. So there is some cross-checking, and but most states do have laws on the book. And those laws on the book do say that you should not be registered in more than one state at any given time.
Although arguably, could, for example, if I have residence in two places, I might be eligible to vote in local elections in both places, but only a national election in one. I think that's true. I mean, I've never done that nor pursued it, but again, it seems like there should be some national database to stop that. Or make it clear, what can you vote in? I mean, if I check, as I've checked the voting rules, it's not illegal to vote in a local election, let's say in Florida, another one in Connecticut, if I own property in both places. And, I have residence in both places, but obviously I should only vote in one national election, I guess, although maybe I could vote for a senator in each place, but not president. It's just not clear to me what's allowable.
Yeah, that's a good question. And obviously a regional database in a mobile country is not as good as national, but in general, as you know, both parties, but particularly the Republican Party, likes decentralized elections down to the local level and certainly state by state. So, and we don't like collecting of data in general. But Doug, you're right. It's definitely an issue. It's definitely an issue. All right, Doug, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Sherry, come on in. Tell folks where you are and what's on your mind, please.
Hi, I'm in Maryland. I'm in Montgomery County, Maryland. I'll be voting for Hogan, Governor Hogan, former Governor Hogan here for Senate. I have a question, Mark. Maybe you can decide who it goes to. A friend asked me who is, I grew up in California and I'm used to mail-in ballots, and I never thought had a second thought about it. A friend is asking how this scenario would work, and I don't have an answer for him. So he has a mail-in ballot that he is sending in. The state has not received it yet. He happens to be in New York or New Jersey, actually. He also, if somebody goes to vote under his name that particular day, or if he goes to vote that particular day, he's basically voted twice, and it could be, one of them could be a scam, one might not. What happens in that scenario? If something hasn't been counted yet, and day of, someone drops in a mail ballot and someone goes to vote? Because not every state, from what I understand, requires that you have an ID.
Yeah, yeah. Lori, how would that work in Wisconsin?
Well, we have what's called a watermark on all of our poll books. And so if we issue you an absentee ballot in your name where you're going to sign on the ballot, on the poll book rather, it's going to say absentee issued. And that election inspector, when you come into the polls then on that day, is required to ask you, have you cast your absentee ballot? And they can specifically then say, have you cast, meaning have you dropped it in the mailbox, or have you delivered it to your clerk? Unfortunately, if you have dropped it into a mailbox, that is considered a cast ballot, and you should not be casting a ballot on election day.
So the question is, if someone is intent to be fraudulent, how does that work?
Well, that is usually an after the fact process that involves our district attorneys. And so if we would receive that absentee ballot and it is, postmarked and shown that it was cast, and then you did cast a ballot on election day, we do know that when we're doing our post-election reconciliation. Post-election reconciliation then does go to the district attorney for potential prosecution of election fraud. And people do get prosecuted.
Diane, does the system work this efficient way? It's government, so maybe not. I go to vote, and my absentee ballot that I put in the mail has already been counted, and I go to vote at 3 p.m, and my absentee has already been processed. Would the system show that ballot had already been processed?
No, what the poll book shows, if you've cast a ballot, mailed it back, or dropped it off at the clerk's office, we have to log it in, we'll say, that's the word I'm going to use, into the statewide voter system. So when we print the poll book, it's going to show where your signature would be in the poll book, absentee returned. Once an absentee is returned, you don't get another ballot. Once the clerk has it, either you've dropped it off in the office or received it in the mail, or you voted in person in the office, it is considered cast. It's a cast ballot. You don't get a second or third ballot. So even though you'd be at the poll standing there saying, well, there's not a number there next to the name, we still have that physical ballot in our possession at that polling location. We can even show the voter that envelope.
But if it's dropped in, and I'm sorry to interrupt, if it's dropped essentially at the same time as someone goes to vote, if at least.
Okay, right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. What would happen is then if a voter, say, came to my office at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, dropped the ballot to me, we've already printed the poll books, they're at the poll. So now they've run to the poll and they've gone in and cast a ballot. Well, when I bring that ballot to the poll to be processed, because all ballots get processed at the poll, they have to give a voter number to that absentee ballot. The absentee ballot is the voter, right? They're just not there in the physical presence. So they're going to see that there's a number there already. Well, now we have a problem. We have to try and solve that. And we cannot process that absentee ballot because there's a number already next to that voter's name. So we have to try and reach out to that voter via a phone call to find out if that voter truly came to the poll and voted. Because again, they have to show photo ID. So somebody would have to show an ID with that exact name on it and sign the poll book. And I don't know that, I mean, could that happen? I'm sure somebody can get a fake ID, but
Well, but there's so many spin-off scenarios of this. Let me ask
Right.
you one. I vote absentee the day before the election, and then that night I decide I want to change my vote. Can I show up and say, I want to vote, please don't count my absentee?
no.
No.
Once we have your ballot, it is considered cast by law. And we cannot give you, we've had this scenario where people came back into the poll and said, oh my God, I didn't know there was a referendum question on the back of the ballot. I want my ballot back so I can fill in my response to the
Right.
question. We can't give them back their ballot. It's in the machine already.
Yep.
And there's no name on a ballot.
Yep.
So.
Thank you. Sherry, thank you. George, go ahead, please.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is George Anastasopoulos and I live in Los Angeles, California. It is the first time I'm going to vote in the United States.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I used to live in Europe, in Greece, and I moved in the States 10 years ago. And then you need 5 years with green card, and then you go through the process. So it's the first time. But I voted many times in Europe and in Greece. And sorry, guys, from what I'm going to say, but the situation is the paradise in the United States for somebody who wants to do fraud. The whole system is very weak. I could give a lecture why it is so weak. And in California especially, they recently voted not to check IDs. So if somebody going to check ID is illegal. And my first question is to the experts here is that how not checking IDs is facilitating a fair election. What is the reason to introduce a law that says that you should not check ID? This is my first question.
Yeah.
And the second question is that if you have, like in Europe, you have local elections and you have European elections. If you have election in national level, because we are electing the president of the country, not the governor of a state, I expect that the rules should be uniform. You should have a common registry in national level, so you can double check everything. And you should definitely have a way to verify that whoever is voting only one time, and it is the correct person who is voting. In the state I live, the combination of unsolicited mail, plus vote harvesting, plus no ID checking is a guarantee for fraud. Sorry that I say that. My first time in the United States, I'm very excited to vote as a United States citizen, but I'm not confident at all that my vote is going to be counted and it's going to be a fair election. Sorry for that. So, I'm disappointed.
George,
I'm disappointed.
No, George, I love what you said, because every issue you raised is a valid one. And you didn't raise it as a conspiracy theorist. You just raised it on the merits of public policy. And every one of the things you raise as an issue, people on the other side have arguments of why it's the way it is. Some of the arguments are from the left, where people on the left oppose requiring identification, and some states like yours have moved in that direction. A lot of the things you're raising are caused by Republicans and people on the right who feel more strongly about the decentralization, who don't want Washington to dictate how the states administer their elections. And in some states, the counties tell the state capital, don't tell us how to administer the elections. We'll do it ourselves. We have a much bigger tradition of decentralization. The upside of that is It's more in keeping with the 10th Amendment and America's tradition of letting the states govern themselves. The downsides you've raised, it opens itself up to, if not widespread fraud, because it would take a major conspiracy to engage in meaningful fraud to take advantage of the weaknesses in the system. But it's certainly the things you raised do undermine confidence in the system, and that's what we're here talking about primarily. Congressman, do you want to take on some of the issues George raised?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, there are constitutional limitations that we have because our founders set up a system whereby you have this, the states get to control it, and that is for your protection. But most importantly, George, is that throughout U.S. history, there's no evidence of mass fraud. Matter of fact, there's no the amount of fraud in our national elections is so tiny as to hardly be identifiable. And so, sure, can people cheat? But I remember our friend who was on earlier who asked a question. I think he was from Delaware and Florida. Was up in Canada, whatever. He said he got 3 ballots, but he only voted once. That's very typical for Americans. They take this responsibility right to heart and very seriously. And we have to stop assuming our neighbor is going to cheat. Our neighbors want the best result they can get, and our republic requires the participation of people to make it safer. The more people that vote, the more likely that result is accurate, and not the other way. But I don't think you will ever see a time in this country where every state or there's some nationalized uniform system across all 50 states, in part because the governors would have a hemorrhage. They want to protect their own territory, and they want to trust the Loris and Dianes in there. And by the way, we would invite you to move to the great state of Wisconsin, where you would have to show a photo ID.
Yeah,
And then
I would be happy to do
that.
Although California has great weather, you have to admit that. I used to study in Chicago many years ago, so I am aware of Midwest winters. So I would prefer, from that point of view, I would prefer California.
George, it's even colder the further north you go.
George, I don't know where you live in California, but I can tell you, you'll never find a brat and a brew the way you can in any tavern in anywhere in Wisconsin. So that alone is incentive enough to move.
Mark,
George,
you've been there.
Yeah, I have. George, thank you. I appreciate it. And congratulations to you. We're happy to have you as one of our fellow voters this time. Lori, Diane, Congressman Marge, so grateful to you all. And I hope that everybody who watches this appreciates not just the 4 of you, but the other people administering our elections and helping preserve and protect people's confidence in what happens. So vitally important. Breaks my heart that you have to worry about safety for yourselves and for your employees, and your colleagues. But what I'm hoping, again, through the series of programs we're doing, is that people around the country will see you're hardworking, well-meaning, professional people trying to give the country what it needs, which is well-administered elections. So hope you'll come back, keep us informed about how it's going, and please count quickly and accurately on election night. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Just to tell everybody about upcoming programs here, tomorrow morning, as usual, the morning meeting, 9 a.m., Sean Spicer, Dan and I will be here. And then tomorrow, we had been taking some Fridays off, but we're on now 5 days a week. So tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time, I'll be here. And then, making sure everybody knows, next Thursday, kind of the Super Bowl of 2 ways, we're doing the morning meeting at 9, and then at 11 Eastern time, if you've never seen this, and most Americans haven't, you're in for a special treat. Karl Rove will talk through all 7 battleground states in the Electoral College, the demography, the geography, early vote, voter registration. He will do what very few people have been able to do in my experience, which is talk through election night and what it's likely to look like and who seems to have the edge in the individual states. 2 hours, time for Karl to walk through all 7 states and tell us what he thinks. Again, that's next Thursday. And then next Thursday night, 6 Eastern time, we're doing our It's All About Pennsylvania program, 2 hours starting at our regular time, but going an extra hour to 8 Eastern. We're going to look at the polling in Pennsylvania, the undecided voters, have some great guests from the state, and again, take your questions and break down the whole thing. It's not the only state that matters, but most people in the campaigns and in political analysts will tell you, of course, if you want to know who's going to win the election, knowing who wins Pennsylvania is probably the best way to do it. So mark your calendars. We'll have information soon about how you can sign up and to watch, be part of those two great episodes. Again, 2 hours with Karl Rove and then 2 hours on Pennsylvania on October 24th. Grateful to you all for making time. So grateful to the folks from Wisconsin to walk us through. And again, I hope you'll be nice to your poll workers and support their work, because the only way we're going to get through this, no matter what the result, is for people to have extreme confidence in the outcome and that the outcome was fairly decided. Have a great evening. I'll see you at 9 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for the morning meeting.